Hello again, my little Volks Grenadiers, and welcome to another Mordian Glory video. In today's episode, we are going to be deep diving the Army special rules for the Germans in Bolt Action 3rd edition. From Buzzsaw and Blitzkrieg to Defend the Fatherland, we are going to get into the nitty-gritty detail of what makes this faction tick. And so without further ado, let's mount up, roll out, and drive right into this thing. Achtung, conscripts! Warlord Games is now an official sponsor of the Mordian Glory channel. And not only that, they have given me an affiliate link which I have popped down in the description below. By using that link, you can get your hands on some awesome World War II bolt action miniatures and at the same time support the Mordian Glory channel.
Bring it to me, Fatherland! 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 Fatherland!
You have all of ideas, so what are you waiting for? Do the right thing and buy yourself some bolt action today. Starting off, we have Hitler's Buzzsaw, which is a classic rule for the Germans. They have had it since 1st edition, and it's great to see that it has continued on into 3rd edition. How this works is all German light and medium machine guns fire one extra shot. Note that this applies to all light and medium machine guns, both those carried by infantry units and vehicle mounted ones. For vehicle mounted ones, first halve the number of shots they roll, then add +1 to the halved number. This means that your light machine guns are going to be firing 5 shots, unlike the usual 4. And when you have like 2 LMGs in a small squad of Germans, they can really lay down a lot of firepower. You've also got your infantry medium machine guns, which will now be firing a whopping 7 shots a pop. That really is phenomenal when you consider that a regular medium machine gun team is only 50 points. The big decision that players are going to have to make when it comes to leveraging the Buzzsaw rule is, do they go for like double LMG inside a bigger squad, or do they try and go for a couple of those MMG teams? The advantage of going down the LMG route is that typically your machine guns will be better protected. If you've got a squad of 6 or 7 bods and only 2 of them have got machine guns, then it means that you have got a lot of extra bodies between you and losing the firepower of those machine guns. Of course, the disadvantage of that route is it is much more expensive. If you go down the medium machine gun teams, then as we said, they are really good bang for buck, but there's only 3 models manning each one of those teams, and they are a bit susceptible to getting destroyed by a good template, be it from a mortar or a light howitzer. In my personal opinion, I think there's benefits to actually including both of those kind of units in your army. I recently ran a list that actually included double MMG team, but then I also had a couple of 6-man veteran squads running around with those LMGs as well. And I have to say, I found it to be a highly effective combo. My MMGs were able to lay down the firepower cheap, and then when my light machine gun squads had got into position, they were then able to start hosing the enemy down, and it just meant that I had the best of both worlds. But then again, I am obsessed with German machine guns in bolt action. I love cramming them into every opportunity. So maybe that's just the way that it worked for me. But in my experience, both options are perfectly viable, either exclusively or working together. But like the rule says, it does also apply to your vehicle mounted machine guns. Now, in my experience, it tends to be medium machine guns that are mounted to German vehicles. And this ends up being that you get about 4 shots from each one of those MMGs. This is because MMGs fire half the number of shots when they are vehicle mounted. So, for example, let's look at a typical German tank like the Panzer III and the Panzer IV. They have a coax MMG and then they have a hull mounted MMG. Now, each one of those would get 3 shots, but then Hitler's Buzzsaw kicks in, so they get 4 shots. So from your typical tank with a big gun and a coax MMG and another MMG, you'd be looking at being able to get a maximum of 8 machine gun shots from that vehicle. Although, of course, it is important to remember that you can only fire the coaxial machine gun or the main gun. So if you fire the main gun, you'd only be getting 4 MMG shots from that vehicle. But if you go for the coax, you would get the 8. Now, as someone who really enjoys using tanks in bolt action, it can make a huge difference having those couple of extra shots. I can't tell you the number of times that my British tanks or my Soviet tanks have just felt like they're farting in the wind when they switch over to their MMGs. And typically at this point with those vehicles, I just choose to fire the main gun because often it's got improved HE anyway. But with my German vehicles, especially with something like the Panzer III, which doesn't have an improved HE, so it's only firing a small template, I find myself very often switching to the double MMGs. And they can be deadly effective, especially when you start thinking about using your tanks to bully enemy infantry, driving them up into point blank range and just hosing them down with both machine guns can be a very effective tactic. Overall, the Buzzsaw special rule is just a fantastic damage buff. It doesn't seem like a lot just getting an extra dice here and there, but it really adds up over the course of the game and can make the Germans a really good army for just slinging shots downrange, picking up models and doing damage. Next, we have Blitzkrieg. Regular and veteran German officers may take 1 additional dice from the bag when making a U-Men snap to action. This means your platoon commanders can snap to action themselves and 3 other units with a total of 4 dice out of the bag, and your company commanders can do a whopping 6 themselves and 5 other dice. It is important to note that this does not affect inexperienced officers. I have seen many players, and myself, I have made this mistake in the early days of playing 3rd edition, use this with inexperienced German officers. You cannot take advantage of it if it's an inexperienced one. This is actually more important than it sounds, because in 3rd edition, with officers being a lot cheaper, but also you needing a lot more of them, people do tend to see them as a bit of a tax and end up with just a lot of inexperienced officers running around leading platoons. For the Germans, if you do that, you will save points, but you will miss out on Blitzkrieg. As for the rule itself, it can be phenomenally powerful when used correctly. Considering that bolt action is a game of pseudo alternate activations, anything that allows you to pull a large amount of dice out the bag at once and have a big go turn can lead to some very impressive and effective assault actions. In one fell swoop, having an officer activate a machine gun to put some pins down on the enemy, a mortar to drop a bombardment on them, and then to have himself with maybe a couple of bods with assault rifles running forward, and then another squad of like assault veteran German grenadiers going in, you can end up pinning the enemy, force them down, going in, point blank ranging them. It can just be one of the more effective ways of making some sort of decisive action happen on the tabletop. Snap 2 is generally a very good ability. With Blitzkrieg, it becomes phenomenal. Next, we have got initiative training. Regular and veteran German units, again, not inexperienced ones, are not affected by the -1 morale penalty for losing the squad/team leader. This rule is a nice to have. It's often one that gets overlooked and it will not come up in every single game. Buzzsaw and Blitzkrieg absolutely will. Initiative training is only really relevant if your opponent is taking snipers, because in bot action, exceptional damage has essentially been removed from the game, and now the only way to pick officers and sergeants out of squads is if you have snipers. And in my experience, there are less and less people taking those in bot action, because snipers used to be really good at taking out like machine gun teams because they could one-shot them. Now that's not really the case. Even though they do hit really well and they do have that +1 to wound, they're not really a major factor on the battlefield. So occasionally you'll lose your NCO and be like, oh, that's okay, I've still run around totally fine. But most of the time you won't really be too worried about initiative training. Finally, before we get to defend the fatherland, we've got Panzer Ace. This is where you can pick one tank which is eligible to be a Panzer Ace, and as long as it is veteran, you can just say for free that is being upgraded to a Panzer Ace. The upgraded vehicle receives an additional +1 to pen when using its main gun against enemy vehicles, as well as getting a +1 modifier to rolling on the damage table. This does not apply to its coaxial weapons. Now, there are a couple of very important restrictions here. Firstly, you only get to do this on one vehicle, so you can't take a bunch of veteran tanks and be like Panzer Ace, Panzer Ace, Panzer Ace. No, in your entire army, no matter how big the game is, one person gets to be the Panzer Ace for free, and they have to be a veteran tank. The other restriction is you can't just take any veteran tank and make it a Panzer Ace. One of the big mistakes that I see people make is they'll be like, oh, well, I'll take a Panzer III and then turn it into a Panzer Ace, and then it's kind of like getting it to be a pseudo Panzer IV. And especially if you take like one of the cheaper Panzer IIIs, which are like a light tank with the medium anti-tank gun, that can seem like really powerful, but that's not possible because the Panzer III does not have the special rule to become a Panzer Ace. If you're wondering how you can tell which tanks can be Panzer Aces and which tanks can't, come down to the unit entry and it will be listed under special rules. So you can see that the Panzer IV ALS G, H and J has the special Panzer Ace, so it can be designated as one if taken as veteran. If we scroll up to the Panzer III, we can see that under none of the special rule areas is there the option for this to be taken as a Panzer Ace. Now that we've cleared that up, I suppose the big question is the Panzer Ace any good? Kinda, is my thoughts on it. Firstly, it is technically a free upgrade, but in reality, it's not really. Very few people end up taking vehicles as veteran. And so, even though it seems like it's a free upgrade, the reality is you are actually paying for a vehicle veteran, so you wouldn't normally bother to do so. So that's really where the cost comes in. However, getting +1 to pen against vehicles is very nice. If you put it on something like a cheap Stug, you can keep the costs relatively affordable even with veteran. And the big thing, I think, is the +1 modifier to the damage table, which means if you get a penetrating hit on a 3+, you destroy the enemy vehicle, which means more often than not, when you get that pen, you are going to destroy it. It can also be huge if you end up getting like a double pen on an enemy vehicle as well, because you've got +1 to the pen modifier, which means you're more likely to beat their armor by +3, and then you get double rolls on the damage table, which would both have a +1 modifier on that damage table. So it really does make you a vehicle destroying machine. I would say on your friendly casual boards versus your mates, the Panzer Ace is a really good ability, because lists don't tend to have to be squeezing every single point and to be absolutely cutthroat to still have enough power to be able to hold their own in the basement battles. In a proper tournament, I can see a lot of people leaving the Panzer Ace at home. This is typically because the kind of armor you face at tournaments tends to be light armor. Light tank spam is really a thing on the tournament scene at the moment, and you don't really need to have +1 pen and +1 damage to knock those things out. And the Panzer Ace is only really effective when fighting enemy vehicles, and there's a lot of armies out there which just will run no vehicles, or they'll run light tanks, which the Panzer Ace is a bit of overkill for. So just to sum up what we've talked about so far, Hitler's Buzzsaw, fantastic rule, 10 out of 10. Blitzkrieg, very good rule. I think that you'll find it very useful in most games. Initiative trading, situational, probably not that great. Panzer Ace, perfectly good for when you're fighting your mates at home, but will lose efficiency and effectiveness when taken to a proper tournament. Now we get to Defend the Fatherland. Now, how this special rule effectively works is certain units in your army will have the special rule Defend the Fatherland. Like we saw with Panzer Ace before, in that special rule section, it will say Defend the Fatherland. If you want to, you can essentially upgrade those units to be part of either the Waffen SS, the Fallschirmjäger, and the Gebirgsjäger. Now, there typically tends to be a points cost associated with that, but you do get a bunch of bonuses for it. The intention behind this rule is to correct some of the issues that were had in 2nd edition. You see, you can run like a full army of, let's say, Fallschirmjäger, but the medium machine gun team wouldn't have had Stubborn. And there was a whole bunch of like campaign books where you could add it in, but it all just got a little bit messy. So I want to say big well done to Warlord for tackling this at the off. And so what this special rule essentially allows you to do is to run a full pure Fallschirmjäger army, or a full Waffen SS army, or a full Gebirgsjäger army, where every single model in that force can be Fallschirmjäger and can feel like Fallschirmjäger. Now, once again, if you're unsure about which units can be taken and upgraded as part of Defend the Fatherland, then look under the special rule section. So we can see here the French milice squads, they cannot be taken as Defend the Fatherland. They can't be upgraded to be one of those special forces. Likewise, Sturm Pioneer Assault Squads, they can, well, actually, no, they can't be. Sturm Pioneers can't be, but regular Pioneers could be upgraded. So you couldn't have Fallschirmjäger Sturm Pioneers, but you could have Fallschirmjäger regular Pioneers. So, what are the benefits of each one of these special armies? The Fallschirmjäger, the SS, and the Gebirgsjäger. The Fallschirmjäger is actually the most straightforward. Any unit that wants to be taken and upgraded to Defend the Fatherland has to be a veteran. So you couldn't take an inexperienced medium machine gun team and then upgrade it to be part of the Fallschirmjäger. It has to be veteran to qualify for this Defend the Fatherland upgrade. Any unit that is taken as Fallschirmjäger can then be upgraded to stubborn. In fact, they must be upgraded stubborn. You don't have a choice, for 1 point per man. And that's it. Take them as veteran, be able to upgrade them stubborn for 1 point. Very simple, very straightforward, and very, very effective. I actually went to a tournament recently where I fully lent into Defend the Fatherland down to the very last man, including things like medics, and every single one of them was taken as veteran and every single one of them was taken as stubborn, and it was unbelievably powerful. I actually ended up coming second at that tournament, going undefeated with 2 wins and a draw. And a massive, massive fact in that was how stubborn my forces were. Having medium machine gun teams that would lose 2 of their crew, but the last one would just stick around at leadership 10 on the morale test, amazing. Really, really strong. My army felt hard as nails across the entire board, and my opponent couldn't even try and pin me out. They couldn't even well, maybe they could pin me out, but they couldn't even break me with like trying to inflict like half casualties. Just being like leadership 10 all the time, or having an officer nearby and only failing your leadership on a double 6 is wild. So I really, really, really like Fallschirmjäger. I think it is massively overlooked. I think it's massively underestimated. But as crazy as it sounds, I think this is actually the most powerful of the Defend the Fatherland. Some people are going to raise an eyebrow at that because Gebirgsjäger are very, very good, but we'll get to those in a moment. Next, we have the Waffen SS. Units must be upgraded to Fanatics for 2 points per man, but you'll notice that unlike with Fallschirmjäger and Gebirgsjäger, there is no restriction or qualifier around unit experience. You can take inexperienced, regular or veteran units as part of the SS. It is also worth pointing out that at plus 2 points per man, this is technically a discounted upgrade. Normally, Fanatics is a 3-point upgrade. So here, we're getting it for a point cheaper. Now, it's still an expensive upgrade, especially if you start putting it everywhere on your army. But it's not going to quite as much eat into your points allowance if you are going via Defend the Fatherland. In addition to being able to get army-wide Fanatics, you also have the inexperienced mixed quality special rule. So any units that are inexperienced in your army will get mixed quality. Throughout the war, the SS were quite different from the idealized army of supermen that propaganda made them out to be. There were certainly elite and battle-hardened outfits, but given the lack of manpower available, strict recruitment guidelines soon dropped. In certain cases, such as with the 12th SS Hitlerjugend, indoctrination could lead to acts of sheer suicidal fury in the face of the enemy. Anytime an order test is failed, roll a d6 and apply the following. On a 1 to 2, the unit immediately goes down and in addition takes d3 pins. That's not as bad as it seems. Normally taking d3 pins on an inexperienced unit would be horrendous because there's a risk that they would start pinning themselves out. But because you will have Fanatics, you must have taken Fanatics. That's actually not going to lead to the risk of you pinning yourself out and losing the whole unit. Instead, it just means that you're probably going to have to do a rally next turn. So you won't lose the whole unit, but it probably takes it out of the game for a single turn. If you roll a 3 to 4, the unit immediately goes down as normal. If you roll a 5 to 6, you have to try and run into combat, which is hilarious. You guys just run out like, and just try and run into combat. It doesn't represent that they've failed the order test and they're like, oh my god, get down. It's like they've lost control of themselves and they're just like throwing themselves fanatically into combat. Now, this sounds like it's really bad, and I think in a lot of cases it probably will result in you losing your unit. But don't forget, you are fanatics. So you only really need to get lucky once in a round of combat, and you could end up winning it. And also, you'll probably find you end up doing a lot more damage than you would expect, because you just get to fight and fight and fight. And so you'll end up with taking quite a few of the enemies down with you. I don't know if you'd play into this with maybe trying to get some like SMGs on the units that they charge in. They've got tough fighter. I do think you would end up with some quite expensive, inexperienced troops in that regard, because you'd be 7 points and then 9 points, and then with an SMG you would end up being 13 points. So that's the same as just a regular, well, I say regular, as a veteran person with a rifle. But still, I think it's quite fun. It's a fun rule, and I think it adds a lot of flavor, and it's more than just everyone can be fanatics. Finally, we have got the Gebirgsjäger. A unit must be taken as veteran, similar with the Fallschirmjäger, and any unit must be upgraded to Fieldcraft for +1 point per man. This is really interesting, and I think in the hands of a smart player, it could be wildly effective. Fieldcraft allows you to treat any rough ground as open ground. Now that's great for maneuverability, and movement wins games. You can have units that are on one side of a forest, and rather than having to like run around the forest, they could just run through the forest. It means you can run wherever you want to go. Also opens up the whole, if you're assaulting people in rough ground, you don't have to assault them 6 inches, you have the full 12 inches, and that could really catch your opponent out by surprise. If you're someone like me who has bot action very much as their secondary game, I think Fallschirmjäger is the simpler one and is the easier one to use, and in many ways that makes it very powerful. Gebirgsjäger, I could think in the hands of an experienced player who can really get the most out of maneuverability and the movement of their units, could be very much a game-winning upgrade. Now, there is a second part to the Gebirgsjäger rule, which is winter equipment. Any infantry unit may take skis for no additional cost. That's not really a big deal. No one really uses the skis rule all that much outside of some more narrative or historical games. An infantry unit equipped with skis ignores all negative movement effects related to snow or ice in scenarios that introduce them. Any artillery units may be upgraded to mountain guns for no additional cost, but you must remove all gun shields from any gun upgraded in this way. Any unit with this upgrade is not affected by difficult ground like other artillery. Instead, it may move through difficult ground in the same manner as infantry and ignores all negative movement effects related to snow or ice in scenarios that introduce them. So the first bit, skis, don't give a crap about. The second bit, about being able to have mountain guns and have highly maneuverable artillery, is very, very interesting. Again, I think a good player would be able to leverage that, and being able to get your guns into positions and move them around creates a much more dynamic force. Typically people are like, okay, my artillery's deployed here, it's going to stay here, and that's all it's going to do. Okay, yeah, fine, that's decent. But being able to reposition your artillery, hit the enemy from other angles, being able to just keep the board fluid, keep the movement going, I think there's definitely something to that. Bringing all of this together, I think Fallschirmjäger is the most powerful because it is the simplest and most straightforward and is very beginner friendly. I think SS is good being able to upgrade everyone to fanatics, but it is going to add a lot of points to your army. Mixed quality, though, is definitely a fun rule, and I think you could definitely have some crazy and memorable battlefield moments with it. Gebirgsjäger, I think, in the hands of a true veteran of the game, would be possibly the most powerful, but it's definitely a bit trickier to leverage, and you don't have the same safety cushion when it comes to morale as you do with the other two. And you know what? I think that's just about everything. I think that the Germans have got some really interesting special rules in 3rd edition. They are quite different to the ones they've had in previous editions, although there are still some firm favourites here, which are trucking along and doing the good work as they always have done. But all of this is just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Do you like the German special rules? Do you like Defend the Fatherland? Which one of the Defend the Fatherland upgrades is the one that you have found to be the most useful? If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to go ahead and smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing. Truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full time without the incredible and generous support of my members. So thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Redfield, 32, Jurgens, Miasma, Try Again, Bragg, RJ, Scorpion, Bonbon Vert, Lord Pryor, Nicholas Walsh, John Stubbs, Guardian, Varney, Sword, Fish Trombone, Picklock the Forged. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.